She grabbed the microphone, turned to the crowd, pointed her manicured finger straight at the man in grease-stained boots walking down the dock, and laughed. Not a quiet laugh, a loud, cutting, performed laugh. The kind designed to humiliate. "If a mechanic like him fixes this yacht," she announced to the cameras, her voice dripping with contempt, "I'll marry him on the spot." The crowd roared. The cameras rolled. And Marcus Holloway. He didn't flinch. He didn't stop walking. Because what none of them knew, what she didn't know, was that this moment was about to cost her everything she thought she had. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You're going to want to see how this ends. The alarm went off at 4:47 a.m. Marcus Holloway silenced it before the second buzz, the way a man does when he's been waking up at the same hour for 15 years. Not because he has to, but because the morning is the only thing that belongs entirely to him. He sat on the edge of the bed for exactly 30 seconds. That was his ritual. 30 seconds of silence before the day started pulling him in every direction. He counted them in his head, the way his father taught him. "Son, don't ever let the world take you before you're ready for it." Then he stood up, rolled his shoulders, and got to work. By 5:15, coffee was made black, no sugar, the way he'd been drinking it since he was 22 and couldn't afford creamer. The kitchen was small, the table scratched from years of homework and late dinners, and a drawing of a horse was taped to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like the state of California. Aya had drawn it 3 weeks ago. She'd labeled it Thunderbolt in her careful 11-year-old handwriting and told Marcus she was going to own a horse someday. He'd told her he believed her. He did. His phone buzzed at 5:30. He already had his jacket on. The number wasn't in his contacts. He almost let it go to voicemail. Scam calls had been heavy that week. But something made him answer. Maybe it was the early hour. Nobody with bad intentions called before 6. "Mr. Holloway." The voice was clipped efficient. Female. The kind of voice that was accustomed to people answering quickly. "Speaking," Marcus said. "My name is Diana Reyes. I'm the operations coordinator for the Langford Group. We have a situation at Bayside Marina that requires immediate attention. We were given your name by—" "What kind of situation?" A brief pause, like she wasn't used to being interrupted. "A marine propulsion issue. The primary drive system on Ms. Langford's vessel is non-operational. We have a media event scheduled for 9 a.m., and we've had 3 engineering teams on board since last night. None of them have been able to resolve the problem." Marcus leaned against the kitchen counter. "What kind of vessel?" "A 160-foot custom motor yacht. The Meridian, twin diesel engines integrated." "I know what a Meridian is," he said. Another pause. "We're prepared to offer double your standard diagnostic rate, plus a completion bonus if the issue is resolved before 9. Marcus looked at the refrigerator, at the horse drawing, at the magnet shaped like California. Aya's orthodontist appointment was in 2 weeks. The estimate had come in at $4,000. Insurance covered half. "I'll be there at 7, he said. He woke Aya at 6:15. She came out of her room the way she always did. Messy hair, one sock on, dragging her backpack like it had personally offended her, and dropped into the kitchen chair with the particular exhaustion that only middle schoolers can manufacture. "Dad, it's still dark." "Sun's coming up." He set a plate in front of her. Scrambled eggs, wheat toast, the orange juice she liked. "Eat. I've got to drop you early." She looked at the plate, then at him. "Early job." "Good job," he said. "Different thing." She picked up her fork. "How good?" "Good enough for Dr. Patterson." That made her look up. She understood what that meant. She didn't say anything for a moment, just ate a piece of toast, thinking. "Is it a hard one?" she asked. "Probably. But you can fix it." He sat down across from her with his coffee. "I haven't seen it yet." "But when you do..." He took a sip, looked at his daughter, 11 years old, and she had her mother's eyes sharp patient, like she was always waiting for the truest version of what you were about to say. Yeah, he said. Probably. She nodded satisfied and went back to her eggs. That was the thing about Aya. She didn't need reassurance. She needed honesty. He'd been careful about that from the beginning, from the first time she'd asked why her mom wasn't coming back, and he'd sat her down and told her the truth in words a 6-year-old could carry. He'd learned early that the kindest thing he could give his daughter wasn't comfort. It was reality handled with care. On the drive to school, she sat in the passenger seat with her backpack between her feet, watching the city wake up through the window. The streets were half empty, the sky that particular shade of gray-blue that exists for maybe 20 minutes between night and actual morning. "Dad," she said. "Yeah." "If you fix something really hard, do you feel it like in your chest?" He thought about it. "Yeah, I do. Like pride. Like rightness," he said. "Like the world clicking into the place it was supposed to be." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I want to feel that." "You will," he said. "You already do. Remember that science project, the one about the water filtration model, yeah?" She smiled a little. That was different. "It wasn't," he said. He pulled up to the school. She gathered her backpack, opened the door, then stopped. "Hey, Dad?" "Yeah." "Don't let anybody make you feel small today." He looked at her. She was looking straight ahead, not at him. "Where'd that come from?" he asked. She shrugged. I know it's fancy people, rich people. They sometimes do that." He didn't ask how she knew. Kids saw things. "I won't," he said. She got out, slung her backpack over one shoulder, and walked toward the entrance without looking back. That was another thing about Aya. She didn't do long goodbyes. She trusted that you'd be there when she got back. Marcus sat there for a moment after she disappeared inside, engine idling. Then he put the truck in drive and headed for the marina. He smelled Bayside before he saw it. Salt and diesel and money, that specific combination that exists only in places where expensive boats sit near expensive restaurants. The parking lot was already half full when he arrived at 6:50. News vans, black SUVs, a catering truck, a row of people in matching polo shirts who looked like they'd been standing there since midnight. He parked his truck, a 09 F150 blue, with a deep scratch along the rear panel that he'd been meaning to fix for 3 years, and grabbed his tool bag from the back. It was an old bag, green canvas worn at the corners with his initials burned into the strap with a wood-burning kit back when he was 20, and thought that kind of thing mattered. He walked toward the dock. The first stare came from a man in a linen blazer standing near the entrance. Not a hostile stare, worse. The kind of look you give something that doesn't quite make sense, like spotting a fire hydrant in a museum. Marcus kept walking. The second stare came from a woman in a headset who glanced at him, looked down at her clipboard, looked back up and said, "Are you the mechanic?" The way she said mechanic, he'd heard that tone before. Like the word itself was slightly embarrassing. "Marcus Holloway," he said. "I spoke with Diana Reyes." The woman touched her earpiece. "1 second." She murmured something, listened, looked at him again like she was being asked to confirm something she'd misunderstood. "Okay, she'll meet you at the gangway." He walked through the crowd toward the dock, and he felt it the shift in the air when he passed through groups of people. Conversations paused. Eyes tracked him. He was the wrong shape for this place. Wrong boots, wrong jacket, wrong truck in the parking lot. He'd felt it before in other rich spaces when he'd been called to fix things in neighborhoods where they could afford to fly in people from 3 different states and still couldn't solve the problem. He'd learned to let the feeling pass through him like weather. The yacht was enormous. He'd worked on marine vessels his whole career since his uncle taught him the basics in the man's cramped garage in Fresno when Marcus was 14. He'd seen big boats, but the Meridian was in another category. 160 feet of white fiberglass and tinted glass sitting in the water like it owned the entire marina, which it practically did. He could see camera crews already positioned on the dock, on the adjacent pier, on what looked like a smaller tender vessel nearby. This wasn't just a repair job. This was a production. Mr. Holloway. Diana Reyes was a compact woman in her mid-40s. Dark hair pulled back, wearing a black blazer and the expression of someone who had not slept. She extended her hand and shook his with the firmness of someone who'd stopped caring about first impressions 4 hours ago. "Walk with me," she said, already moving. 3 teams, 12 engineers total. The primary propulsion system is non-responsive. Engines won't turn over, but the diagnostics aren't showing any obvious failure codes. The last team had it on the lift for 6 hours and couldn't isolate the source. "Who installed the current drive system?" She glanced at him. "Munich, custom build, 3 years ago." "Service history. I'll get you the records." "I want to talk to whoever's been running the vessel. Captain, first mate, whoever." She nodded. "Captain Osei. He's on board." "Good." He looked at the yacht as they walked. "And Ms. Langford." Diana's expression shifted slightly, just a flicker. "She's aware you're here." "What does that mean?" Before Diana could answer, there was a sharp burst of laughter from the far side of the dock, loud, performative, the kind of laugh designed to carry. Marcus turned. She was standing near the bow of the yacht, surrounded by 4 or 5 people in business casual, all of them with the particular ease of people who had never worried about parking meters or orthodontist bills. She was taller than he'd expected, with the precise, intentional appearance of someone who spent significant money looking like she hadn't. Dark blazer, white shirt, hair down. A glass of something sparkling in her hand at 7 in the morning, because at this level, you could do that. Vanessa Langford. He'd looked her up on the drive over. 41. CEO of Langford Systems, a tech company that had quietly become one of the major players in logistics software. Self-made, more or less, the kind of biography that said, started in a garage, but skipped the part where the garage was in a wealthy suburb and had a trust fund for a safety net. Still, smart. That much was clear. What was also clear, from the moment she turned and saw him, was that she had already made a decision about him. It wasn't hate. It wasn't even contempt exactly. It was something colder, the casual dismissal of someone who has never once been wrong about the way they sort people. She said something to the person beside her, a man in a gray blazer. He laughed. Then she raised her voice. Not to Diana. Not to anyone in particular. To the air, to the cameras, to the assembled crowd of polo shirts and press lanyards. "Is this him?" The question landed on the dock like something thrown. Marcus stopped walking. "Is this the mechanic?" Vanessa said, stepping forward. There was a smile on her face, but it wasn't a warm one. It was the smile of someone performing confidence for an audience. "Because I've had 3 engineering firms on this boat. Aerospace engineers, marine specialists, a team from Hamburg that flew in last night." She let that sit for a moment. "And now we've got what, a local guy?" The people around her laughed. Not cruelly, not viciously, but they laughed and it rippled out, and Marcus felt it in the particular way you feel a laugh that's aimed at you, like a small collision. He didn't look away from her. He didn't smile. He didn't respond. She took 2 more steps toward him, close enough now that the nearby cameras could clearly capture both of them. She was working the moment. He could see it in the way she held her body, the slight angle toward the nearest lens. "Tell you what," she said, her voice carrying. "I'm a woman of my word. You fix that engine before 9 o'clock. She paused for effect, let the crowd lean in. "I'll marry you. Right here on this dock. How's that?" The crowd erupted. Laughter, applause, the sound of people who had been standing around waiting for something to happen and were glad it finally had. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. She was waiting for something. A flinch, an embarrassed laugh. A "yes, ma'am" delivered with his hat in his hand. She was waiting for him to perform the role she'd already written for him, the small man made smaller. He didn't give it to her. Instead, he turned to Diana Reyes. "Service records," he said, "and get me Captain Osei." He walked up the gangway onto the yacht without another word. Behind him, he heard the crowd murmur. A different sound now, not laughter. Something less certain. He didn't look back. The engine room was 3 levels down, and it was everything he expected, immaculate in the way that expensive things maintained by other people tend to be. Too clean in a way that told him this system had been worked on by people afraid to get dirty. He set his bag down, rolled his sleeves up, and crouched in front of the primary housing. Captain Osei was already there. A tall man, 60s, white-bearded, with the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades on water and had stopped being impressed by the people who owned what he operated. He looked at Marcus without the appraisal the others had given him. Just, "You Holloway." "Yeah." "Good." He handed him a thick folder. "Service records. I marked the sections. September we had vibration issues. They recalibrated and told us it was resolved." "But you didn't think it was." Osei's jaw tightened. "I logged my concern. I was told the engineering team had cleared it." Marcus opened the folder, found the September entry, read it twice. "Who authorized the clearance?" Osei hesitated, just a half second. "Ms. Langford," he said. Marcus looked up at him. "She was in a hurry," Osei said simply. "She's often in a hurry." Marcus nodded and turned back to the engine. He put his hand on the housing, not turning anything yet, just listening, the way his uncle had taught him before he'd ever learned what tools to use. Listen before you touch. The machine always tells you what it needs. People never listen. He listened. And somewhere inside the precision mechanics of a 160-foot custom yacht, in the space between the manufactured silence and the faint ghost of a misalignment that 12 other people had walked past, Marcus Holloway heard it. He reached for his bag. He got to work. The engine room had its own kind of silence, not the silence of emptiness, the silence of pressure. Of 12 engineers having stood in this exact space over the past 18 hours and walked out without answers. Marcus could feel it the way you feel the temperature of a room that's been held too long. Something tight in the air. Something unresolved. He didn't rush. That was the first thing his Uncle Raymond had drilled into him back in that Fresno garage when Marcus was 14, and too eager, always reaching for the wrench, before he understood what he was reaching into. A man who rushes a diagnosis is a man who's working for his ego, not the machine, Raymond used to say, usually while not looking up from whatever he was elbow deep in. The machine doesn't care how fast you are. It cares if you're right. Marcus crouched in front of the primary drive housing and did what he always did first. Nothing. Just looked. Just let his eyes move the way they wanted to, without a checklist, without a theory. He'd learned that theories were dangerous in the early minutes they made you look for confirmation instead of truth. Captain Osei stood a few feet behind him, arms folded, watching. Not impatiently. The man had the stillness of someone who understood that some work had its own pace. "How long have you been running this vessel?" Marcus asked, still looking at the housing. 4 years, Osei said. "Took her over when she was new." "And the September vibration, where were you when it started?" "Off the coast, about 40 nautical miles out. We'd just come up to full power after a slow transit through the harbor. And it felt like something catching," Osei said. "Not grinding, not a bang, just a catch. Like a hiccup. Every few minutes at first, then more frequent." Marcus nodded slowly. "The team that cleared it in September, did they drop the shaft?" "They said they didn't need to." Marcus looked back over his shoulder at the captain. Osei's face was neutral, but his jaw was doing something particular, the controlled tightening of a man who had been right about something and had been told he wasn't. "They said it was a fuel delivery inconsistency," Osei added. "Cleaned the injectors, adjusted the timing, ran her for 20 minutes, and called it done." 20 minutes, Marcus repeated. 20 minutes. Marcus turned back to the engine. He reached out and placed both hands flat on the housing, not gripping anything, not turning anything, just feeling. The metal was cool and still, and it told him nothing yet, but the touch was part of it. Part of getting introduced to the problem. Did Ms. Langford know you'd logged a concern after the September fix? A beat. She knew. Osei said carefully. We had a conversation. She said she trusted the engineer's assessment. And you said, I said I'd like a second opinion. And she said, Osei was quiet for a moment. She said she appreciated my thoroughness and that the matter was closed. Marcus almost smiled. How many times has that happened? Her closing a matter you weren't finished with. He could hear the captain exhale through his nose. More than once. All right, Marcus said. He reached into his bag and pulled out his borescope, a long, flexible diagnostic camera old enough that the grip had been rewrapped in electrical tape twice, but precise enough that he'd taken it apart and calibrated it himself 6 months ago. He started threading it in, slowly checking the primary shaft alignment from the inside. Tell me about the morning this happened, when she wouldn't start. Yesterday. We were prepping for the media event. It was supposed to be a demonstration cruise 30 minutes out and back. Ms. Langford wanted the cameras on deck during the departure. I went to bring the engines up and... He paused. Nothing, no response. Full power attempt, total unresponsiveness. Diagnostics showed no fault codes. No codes at all. Clean board. Marcus stopped. He pulled the scope back, slightly adjusted the angle, pushed it forward again. That's the tell, he said mostly to himself. Excuse me. Clean board with no response, Marcus said. That's not a mechanical failure, that's a mechanical argument. Something's misaligned enough that the system is protecting itself, but not enough to trigger a fault threshold. It's in a dead zone. Osei was quiet. Then, none of the other teams said that. I know, Marcus said. Hand me the calibration gauge. It's in the front pocket of my bag, silver handle. Upstairs, the dock had not gotten quieter. If anything, it had gotten louder. 2 more camera crews had arrived. The catering tent, which had been set up for what was supposed to be a post-cruise press breakfast, was doing brisk business with people who had nothing to do but eat and wait and speculate. The mood had settled into something between anticipation and entertainment, the particular atmosphere of a crowd that is gathered around a spectacle and isn't entirely sure what they're rooting for. Vanessa Langford stood near the starboard rail with her communications director, a man named Philip, who wore his anxiety visibly and had been checking his phone every 90 seconds for the past hour. 9 o'clock is in 45 minutes, Philip said. I'm aware, Vanessa said. If the engine isn't running, we're looking at... I know what we're looking at, Philip. He went quiet. She took a sip of her sparkling water and watched the dock without expression. The truth was, Vanessa Langford had not entirely meant to say what she'd said, not the way she'd said it. She'd intended something lighter. A joke, the kind of self-assured humor that played well on camera and made her seem both powerful and in on the gag. If you fix this, I'll marry you, was the kind of line a confident woman said with a laugh, not an invitation. But she'd looked at him at the boots and the worn jacket and the green canvas bag, and something had come out sharper than she'd planned, more edge than humor. And the crowd had gone with it the way crowds always went with whatever she gave them, and now it was on camera, and it was real, and it was out in the world in a way she couldn't walk back. She told herself it didn't matter. He was a mechanic. He'd try and fail like the others, the event would have to be rescheduled. She'd issue a brief statement, and the whole morning would become a minor footnote. She almost believed herself. He hasn't come back up, Philip said. I noticed. Is that a good sign? It means he's either working or lost, she said. We'll find out which. What she didn't say, what she wouldn't have said to Philip or anyone else on that deck, was that something about the way Marcus Holloway had looked at her before walking onto the yacht had stayed with her. Not anger, not embarrassment, just steadiness. The particular stillness of a man who had already decided that her opinion of him was not relevant data. She didn't like that. She was accustomed to reactions, to people adjusting themselves in her presence, becoming smaller or more careful or more performative. She was accustomed to effect. He hadn't given her any. Below, Marcus had the calibration gauge in one hand and the scope in the other, and he was moving with the careful economy of someone who has stopped being anywhere except exactly where he is. "Right there," he said quietly. "What is it?" Osei asked. "Come here." Marcus shifted to the side, made room. "Look at the gauge reading. Primary shaft. What do you see?" Osei leaned in, studied the reading. "0.02 millimeters," he said. Then slower, "That's the misalignment?" 2 millimeters, Marcus said. "In marine drive mechanics, that's not small. That's the difference between function and failure, especially at full power. The shaft is binding at high RPM. Not enough to show on diagnostics under test conditions, but the moment you try to bring it up to real operational speed, the system shuts itself down." "Protecting the shaft," Marcus said. "Smart engineering, actually. The safeguard works exactly as designed. Problem is, nobody looked close enough to find what triggered it." Osei straightened up. He was quiet for a moment. "The September fix," he said. "They went after the symptom," Marcus said, "not the cause. Vibration at full power, fuel delivery inconsistency. Those are downstream effects. The misalignment was already there. It just hadn't gotten bad enough to kill the system yet. Until now. Until now. Probably the transit here pushed it over the threshold." Marcus was already reaching into his bag for the alignment toolkit, a set of precision instruments his uncle had built himself over decades. They were not modern, not digital, not impressive looking, but they were calibrated by hand, and they were right. "I'm going to need about 40 minutes. Maybe 35 if things go the way I think they will." Osei looked at his watch. "You have 38. Then I need you to do one thing for me. Name it." "Keep everyone off this deck," Marcus said. "I don't need an audience. I need quiet." He didn't get quiet. 12 minutes in, he heard footsteps on the ladder. He didn't look up. "Diana said you found something." Vanessa Langford's voice was different down here. Not smaller, she didn't have a smaller voice, but recalibrated somehow. The performance quality was gone. This was her actual register, Marcus guessed. Clipped, direct, slightly impatient. "I found the problem," he said without looking up. "I'm fixing it." "What is it?" "Drive shaft misalignment, 2 millimeters. A pause. "That's it." He heard the disbelief in it, not quite dismissal but close. Like someone who had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and 18 hours and 12 engineers and couldn't accept that the answer could be that specific, that small. 2 millimeters at operating speed is the difference between this engine running and this engine protecting itself from catastrophic failure, he said. He still hadn't looked at her. His hands were steady and moving. "Your September team cleaned injectors and called it. They didn't check shaft alignment because the vibration was intermittent and the diagnostic board was clean. They went home. The problem stayed." "That's..." She stopped. "The recalibration that was recommended in September's service log," Marcus continued. "The one that got deferred, that would have caught this. Probably." He felt the air in the room change. He knew what was in the service log, because Osei had shown him, and he knew that the recommendation for a full shaft alignment check had been made in writing by the vessel's own captain, and had been marked "Reviewed Defer to Next Scheduled Maintenance" by someone in the Langford Group's operations office. He didn't know if that decision had been Vanessa's directly or someone acting under her authority. It didn't matter to him mechanically, but it clearly mattered to her. "You don't need to be in here for this," he said. "You need to be on that deck in..." He glanced at his watch. 26 minutes. I'll have your engine running. You're very confident for someone who just started. I'm not confident, he said. I'm correct. There's a difference. Another pause, longer this time. What if you're wrong? He finally looked up. She was standing at the base of the ladder in a blazer that probably cost more than his truck payment, and she was looking at him with an expression he hadn't expected. Not contempt, not the performance from earlier. Something more honest than that, something that looked, if he was reading it right, a little like worry. Then I'll tell you I'm wrong, he said, and I'll tell you exactly why and exactly what the next step should be. But I'm not wrong. She looked at him for a long moment. You're not going to say anything about what you set up there, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. She didn't flinch, but something moved behind her eyes. What do you want me to say? Nothing, he said. I don't need anything from you. I just want to be clear that I'm down here because of the work, not because of any of that. The joke. Is that what it was? She didn't answer. After a moment she turned and went back up the ladder. Marcus watched her go, then turned back to the engine. 24 minutes. He got back to work. The thing about precision work, real precision, the kind that exists in the narrow margin between functional and broken, is that it demands a particular state of mind. Not focus exactly, though focus matters. It's closer to absence. The ability to stop being a person with feelings and history, and a daughter who draws horses on refrigerator magnets, and become, for a specific window of time, only the problem in front of you. Marcus had always been able to do that. His ex-wife Denise had told him once, not unkindly but honestly, which was her way, that it was one of the most remarkable and most frustrating things about him. You go somewhere when you work, she'd said. Like you step through a door, and whatever's on the other side, that's where you actually live. He'd thought about that a lot over the years. He wasn't sure she was wrong. He was through that door now. The misalignment was in the coupling between the intermediate shaft and the primary shaft, exactly where he'd suspected from the scope reading. 2 millimeters of drift, almost nothing. A margin error. A rounding mistake in the physical world. He worked the adjustment in increments, checking the gauge after each movement, resetting, checking again. This was not fast work. This was not impressive-looking work. There were no dramatic sparks or sudden revelations. Just a man and a gauge, and a shaft that needed to be exactly where it was supposed to be. 17 minutes and his phone buzzed. He ignored it. 14 minutes. The adjustment was within half a millimeter. 11 minutes. He stopped. Checked the gauge from 3 angles. Rechecked. Set the gauge down and put both hands back on the housing, just listening again the way Raymond had taught him, feeling for the truth of it, with something older than measurement. Yeah, he said to no one. He stood up, gathered his instruments, and climbed the ladder. The deck was louder than when he'd left it. The crowd had grown. He counted at least 4 camera crews, a row of press lanyards, and 1 man in a blazer who appeared to be doing a live commentary directly into his phone camera. Diana Reyes appeared at his shoulder almost immediately. Can you run it? She asked. Get Captain Osei to the helm, Marcus said. Bring her up slow, 20%, then hold. Wait for my signal, then bring her to 60. Not full power. 60 is enough to confirm. Full power after I've watched her run for 2 minutes. Diana was already speaking into her headset. Marcus walked to the rail out of the center of the crowd and waited. Vanessa was standing 30 feet away near the bow. She was watching him. He could see her in his peripheral vision, and he made the decision not to look at her, not because of what she'd said earlier, but because the next 60 seconds required his full attention, and she wasn't part of them. The engines turned over, not with a roar, with a low, settling rumble, like a large animal waking up. The sound moved through the deck, through the hull, through the water around them. Marcus felt it in his feet and listened to it the way he always listened, tracking it through its frequencies, waiting for the catch. The hitch, the irregular note that would tell him he'd missed something. The rumble steadied, deepened, held, clean. Diana's voice in his ear, 60%. Go, he said. The engines climbed. The water at the stern churned white. The deck vibrated with it, not the bad vibration, not the catching asymmetric shake of a misaligned shaft, but the full, even, purposeful vibration of machinery running the way it was designed to run. The sound that went through the crowd was not applause, not at first. It was something more involuntary than that. A collective breath, a held moment releasing. Then someone started clapping, and it spread, and Marcus stood at the rail and watched the water churn, and felt not pride exactly, not triumph, that thing he'd tried to describe to Aya that morning. The rightness, the world clicking into the place it was supposed to be. He turned around. The cameras were all pointed at him. He hadn't expected that. He'd expected them to be on the yacht, on the engines, on the visual confirmation of the water behind the stern. But they were on him. A dozen lenses, a dozen red recording lights, and for a moment, just a moment, Marcus Holloway felt the full weight of what had just happened in this place, in front of these people, in this world he had not asked to enter. He looked for Vanessa. She was still near the bow. She hadn't moved. The performative ease she'd carried all morning was gone, not shattered, not collapsed, but quietly evacuated. She was holding her glass at her side, not drinking from it, and she was looking at him with an expression he'd seen before on the faces of people who had been wrong in a way they'd have to reckon with. He didn't feel satisfaction. That surprised him. He'd half expected to feel something sharp and clean, the vindication of a man who'd been publicly mocked and had publicly answered. But what he felt instead was quieter than that. Something closer to patience. Like the moment wasn't his to own or claim, it was just true, and truth was its own thing, indifferent to who had doubted it. Diana Reyes appeared at his shoulder again. Full power. 2 minutes, he said. Then, yes. Ms. Langford wants to speak with you. I know, he said. After. He stood at the rail and watched the engines run and thought about Aya, who was probably in second period by now, sitting in some classroom with her notebook open, not knowing that her father had just fixed a problem, that 50 engineers, he'd never said 50. Diana had said 12, but the story had already started moving, couldn't fix. He thought about what he'd tell her tonight, how he'd say it. Not to brag, she wouldn't want brag from him, she'd find it embarrassing, but honestly. The way she'd asked him to be honest, the way she'd looked at him over her toast that morning, with her mother's patient eyes. What did you do today, Dad? I listened to a machine, he'd say, and it told me what it needed. And then I fixed it. She'd nod. Like that was enough. Like that was everything. 2 minutes passed. Marcus gave Diana the signal. The engines climbed to full power, and the water behind the Meridian turned white, and the crowd on the dock cheered, and the cameras captured every frame of it, and Marcus Holloway stood at the rail in his grease-stained boots and watched the morning become something none of them had expected. Then he turned around, picked up his bag, and walked toward where Vanessa Langford was standing. It was time to talk. She met him halfway. That surprised him. He'd expected her to hold her ground near the bow, to make him come the full distance, because that was the kind of person she'd shown him she was, that morning, someone who positioned herself where she had the most control. But she was moving toward him before he'd taken 10 steps, cutting through the small crowd of polo shirts and press lanyards, with the decisive stride of someone who has decided to get in front of something before it gets in front of her. They met near the middle of the deck, and for a moment they just stood there. Two people who had started this morning on opposite sides of a joke that wasn't quite a joke, and the cameras were still rolling, and Philip, the communications director, was hovering about 20 feet back with the expression of a man who has just watched a controlled burn begin to escape its containment. "Walk with me," Vanessa said. It wasn't a request, but it wasn't quite an order either. It was something in between the reflex of a woman who had been giving direction her entire adult life and wasn't fully aware of how it sounded anymore. Marcus considered it for half a second, then nodded and followed her toward the stern, away from the cameras, away from the crowd, to the quieter end of the deck where the wake of the engines churned white below them, and the noise of the marina felt like it belonged to a different world. She stopped at the rail, looked out at the water. He stood beside her and waited because he had learned a long time ago that the person who speaks first in a silence like this is the person who needs something from the other one, and he didn't need anything from her. She let the silence run for about 15 seconds. Then she said, "I owe you an apology." Her voice was different again. Not the engine room voice, not the dock performance. Something flatter, more stripped down. Like she'd taken off something she'd been wearing all morning and was standing in what was underneath. "You don't have to," he started. "I know I don't have to," she said, still looking at the water. "That's why I'm doing it." He let that land, then nodded. "What I said up there was—" She paused, and he could see her searching for the word. The exact right word, the way someone does when they've spent years in rooms where words are leverage, and they're suddenly trying to use them as something else. It was unkind. It was designed to get a reaction, and it was unkind, and I don't usually operate like that. "You usually save it for people who aren't standing right in front of you," Marcus said. She turned to look at him then, not with anger, with something that was almost like respect, the involuntary kind you develop for someone who's hit a nerve precisely. "Yes," she said. "I suppose that's fair." "I'm not trying to be harsh," he said. "I'm just being accurate." "You do that a lot, don't you? Being accurate. Comes with the job." She turned back to the water. A boat was moving in the far end of the marina, a small sailboat, someone out for an early morning, someone who had nothing to do with any of this. Marcus watched it for a moment. "The deferred recalibration," she said. "In September. It's in the log." "I know it's in the log," she said quietly. "I signed off on deferring it. We had the Singapore conference that week, and the boat wasn't scheduled to go out again for 6 weeks, and the team said—" She stopped. "The team said it was probably precautionary." Captain Osei didn't think so. "No." The word was short, and she sat with it. "He didn't." "He logged it." "He did." "And you reviewed it." "I reviewed it," she said, and her jaw was doing something that Marcus recognized because he'd seen it in the mirror, the quiet tension of someone absorbing accountability, refusing to let it become excuse. "And I made a call based on what I was told and what I needed that week to look like, and I was wrong." Marcus was quiet. 12 engineers, she said. 18 hours. And the answer was something I could have prevented 4 months ago for the cost of an afternoon and a proper inspection. "More or less," he said. She exhaled once short and controlled. "That's not a comfortable thing to sit with." "No," he said. "I imagine it's not." They stood there for a moment, and the water moved below them, and the engines ran clean and steady in the hull beneath their feet. And Marcus thought about how many conversations he'd had in his life that had started with someone underestimating him and ended with them standing somewhere quieter, asking him to explain something they should have understood from the beginning. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She glanced at him. "You're going to anyway." "Why the cameras? Why make the whole thing public? If you'd had this fixed quietly this morning, nobody would have known it was a problem." She was quiet for a beat. Then, "Because I've learned that transparency reads better than secrecy. If something goes wrong publicly, you own it publicly. It's better optics." "It's not about optics," Marcus said. "In my world. I know what it is in your world," he said, and his voice didn't rise, didn't sharpen, stayed exactly level. "I'm saying the reason you were transparent wasn't because it was the right thing to do. It was because it was the strategic thing to do. Those aren't the same thing, and I think you know that." She stared at him. He met her gaze and held it not aggressively, just steadily. The same way he'd looked at her on the dock when she'd made her joke, and the crowd had laughed and he'd simply kept walking. "Who are you?" she said. Not unkindly. More like someone asking a question they genuinely don't have the answer to. "I'm a mechanic," he said. "From Fresno originally. I've got a shop on Clement Street. I've got a daughter in 6th grade who draws horses and wants to own one someday. I woke up at 4:47 this morning because that's when I wake up." "That's not what I meant." "I know what you meant," he said. "But that's who I am. That's all of it." She looked at him for a long moment, and something was happening behind her eyes that he couldn't quite read. Not attraction, though the tabloid version of This Morning would probably manufacture that. Something more complicated. The recalibration of a person who has run a model of the world for a long time and is suddenly sitting with evidence that the model might be missing something. "The bonus," she said, shifting. "Diana mentioned a completion bonus. I want to double it." "That's not necessary." "It is to me." "Then pay it to Diana," Marcus said. "She's been managing this circus since before sunrise, and I'd bet she hasn't had breakfast." Vanessa blinked. Then for the first time all morning she laughed, not the performance laugh, not the crowd laugh, but a real one. Small and a little surprised, like she'd found a coin she hadn't known she'd lost. "She'd refuse it," Vanessa said. "Then she's smarter than both of us," Marcus said. Philip materialized at Vanessa's elbow approximately 45 seconds later, as if he'd been waiting for the laughter as a signal that it was safe to approach. He was holding his tablet in both hands, like a shield. "The press wants a statement," he said to Vanessa. Then cautiously to Marcus. "And there are 2 journalists who'd like to speak with you, Mr. Holloway, if you're—" "No," Marcus said. "They're from—" "I'm sure they are," Marcus said. "No." Philip looked at Vanessa uncertain. He said, "No, Philip," she said. And there was something slightly different in her tone now. Not the automatic authority of someone managing a subordinate, but the considered firmness of someone making a choice. "Give us a few more minutes." Philip retreated. Marcus watched him go, then turned back to Vanessa. "You're going to have to give them something," he said. "I know. I'll explain the technical issue. Take responsibility for the deferred maintenance. Thank the team." "Thank Captain Osai specifically," Marcus said. "By name. He flagged this in September and he was right, and he's been right every time he's disagreed with the decision that got overruled. A man like that deserves to be named." She looked at him. "You've known him for what, 3 hours?" "I know the type," Marcus said. "And so do you. You just don't always listen to them." She absorbed that. Didn't argue it. That was something he thought, the willingness to absorb without deflecting. It didn't mean she'd change. It just meant she was honest enough not to pretend. "And what about you?" she said. "The cameras are going to want the mechanic who fixed the unfixable. That video from the dock this morning is already everywhere, Marcus." It was the first time she'd used his name. He noticed it. "Let it be everywhere," he said. "It doesn't change anything about my day. It might change a lot of things." "Maybe," he said. "But I've got a shop on Clement Street. I've got a truck with a scratch on the rear panel I haven't gotten around to fixing. I've got a daughter whose braces appointment is in 2 weeks. He picked up his bag from where he'd set it against the rail. "None of that changes because somebody filmed me doing my job." Most people, Vanessa said, would be thinking about how to leverage this. "I know," he said. "That's the difference." He started to move, and she reached out, not grabbing just a half gesture, a hand slightly raised, and he stopped. "I meant it," she said. "What I said. About the bonus." "I know you did. And I meant the apology." "I know that too," he said. "I just want—" She paused. He waited. This, he'd learned, was where the real thing came, in the pauses when people ran out of the words they'd prepared and had to find the actual ones. "I want you to know that I don't usually lead with dismissal. I'm good at reading people. I've built something significant by being good at reading people. And I looked at you this morning and I read you wrong. Completely. And that bothers me a lot more than the engine." Marcus stood with that. It was, he thought, the most honest thing she'd said all morning. Maybe the most honest thing anyone had said to him in a long time, with that particular sting of someone admitting not just that they were wrong, but that they were wrong about something they prided themselves on being right about. Don't use it to beat yourself up, he said. Use it to get better at looking. She held his gaze. That's very generous coming from the man I publicly humiliated. You embarrassed yourself more than you embarrassed me, he said. And you're smart enough to know that. So let's call it even and let me get home before school pickup. Getting off the yacht turned out to be harder than getting on. The crowd had thickened while he'd been at the stern with Vanessa, and now it was a proper media scrum. Cameras, microphones, people calling his name like they knew him, which they didn't, though a few of them were going to act like they did by the end of the day. Marcus kept his head down and moved through it with the particular practiced invisibility of someone who has navigated tight spaces his whole life, not ducking, not rushing, just steady, finding the gaps, moving through them. Diana Reyes appeared at his side like she'd materialized from the air. I'll walk you to your truck, she said. You don't have to. I know. She fell into step beside him. But I will. They walked. She was efficient at clearing path, a look here, a small redirect there, the practiced choreography of someone who managed chaos for a living. A journalist called out Marcus's name. Diana angled her body between them and kept walking without acknowledging the call at all. You're good at that, Marcus said. I've had practice, she said. She's a demanding environment. She's smart, he said. Yes. And she's not a bad person. Diana glanced at him sideways. No, she's not. A pause. She's a person who's gotten very accustomed to the world arranging itself the way she expects. It doesn't make her bad. It makes her limited, in a specific way. You've thought about this a lot, Marcus said. 4 years, Diana said. I've had time. They reached the parking lot. His truck sat where he'd left it, and in the sea of black SUVs and catering vehicles, it looked exactly as out of place as he'd felt walking in that morning, the scratch on the rear panel catching the morning light, the sun-faded paint on the hood, the side mirror he'd replaced with a slightly different trim level because the exact one was back-ordered. He unlocked it, threw his bag in the back. Mr. Holloway, Diana said. He turned. She was holding out an envelope. White, no markings. Thick. The bonus, she said, plus the rate. She insisted on cash because she thought it was more respectful than a check. She read somewhere that she stopped recalibrated. She wanted to do something right, and that was her version of it. He took the envelope, weighed it in his hand, didn't open it. Tell her I said thank you, he said. I will. Diana paused, and for a moment her professional composure shifted slightly. Not broke, just moved. For what it's worth, and I know it might not be worth much coming from this circus, what you did this morning was something. The way you handled all of it. The whole thing. I fixed an engine, Marcus said. You know that's not what I mean. He looked at her. She was watching him with the straightforward gaze of someone who means what they say and isn't asking for anything back. Yeah, he said. I know. He got in the truck. He sat in the parking lot for a moment before starting the engine. Not long, just the 30 seconds he allowed himself every morning translated now to this strange mid-morning pause in a marina parking lot surrounded by people who were still talking about him. He opened the envelope, counted it without hurrying. More than he'd expected, significantly more than double his rate, plus the bonus Diana had mentioned. Enough to cover Aya's braces with something left over. Enough to maybe fix the scratch on the rear panel, though he probably wouldn't, because 3 years of not fixing it had made it part of the truck's character, and he'd grown attached to it. He put the envelope in the glove compartment. He started the truck. His phone was buzzing when he pulled out of the parking lot. Unknown numbers, one after another, the way they did when something got loose on the internet and started moving. He turned the ringer off and drove. The city looked the same as it had at 7 that morning. Same streets, same traffic, same particular light of an October morning moving toward noon. Nothing about it had changed because of what happened at the marina. He hadn't changed, not in the ways that mattered. He was still the same man who'd woken up at 4:47. Still the man with the shop on Clement Street, and the daughter in 6th grade, and the truck with the scratch on the rear panel. What had changed? And he could feel it somewhere low and quiet. Not pride, but something adjacent was the record. The simple, clear, undeniable record of a morning when someone had said you can't, and the answer had come back without argument, without drama, without anything except the steady truth of doing the work correctly. He thought about his Uncle Raymond, who had died 6 years ago, and who had never once in Marcus's memory cared whether anyone was watching, who had run a garage in Fresno for 38 years and fixed things that other people couldn't fix, and gone home every evening, and cooked dinner, and watched the news, and gone to bed, and who had never not once expressed the slightest interest in being recognized for any of it. "The work knows," Raymond had told him once. "You don't need anything else to know. The work knows." Marcus drove. He stopped at the school's neighborhood about 20 minutes before pickup, early enough that the parking spots near the front were still available, and pulled over and cut the engine. He had a granola bar in the center console, the kind Aya liked. He ate it and watched the street and let the morning settle around him. His phone buzzed again. He looked at it this time. A text from a number he didn't recognize, which was unusual because typically he ignored those. But the first few words were visible in the notification, and they stopped him. "My name is Kevin Park. I'm a journalist with the Chronicle. I know you said no to the press." He put the phone face down on the passenger seat. Then he picked it up again and read the rest. "But I wanted to say I have a daughter too. She's 8. I wasn't going to call this story what everyone else is going to call it. I just thought you should know that. Take care of yourself, Mr. Holloway." He read it twice. Then he set the phone down and looked out the windshield at the quiet street and the rows of parked cars and the ordinary mid-morning life of a school neighborhood, and he felt something move through him, not quite emotion, but the nearness of it, the way you feel a large thing passing close without quite touching you. He thought about Aya asking him that morning, "Don't let anyone make you feel small today." How she'd said it looking straight ahead, not at him. The particular sideways wisdom of a kid who sees more than you think they do. He was going to tell her tonight, the whole thing. Not to impress her. She'd find the impressive parts herself, she always did, but because she deserved to know that her father had gone out into a world that looked at him and decided he was small, and he had simply done what he knew how to do. And it had been enough. It had been more than enough. The school bell rang. He could hear it faintly through the closed windows, and then the sounds of the building opening voices movement, the particular controlled chaos of 100 kids being released into the afternoon. He watched the entrance and waited for the familiar shape of his daughter backpack over one shoulder, one sock always slightly lower than the other. That particular walk she had that was entirely her own, and that he loved with the specific helpless love of a parent watching their child exist in the world. She came through the doors, looked toward where he always parked, found the truck, started walking. She could tell something had happened. He could see it in the way she was watching him as she walked, that patient reading look she'd gotten from her mother. She opened the passenger door and climbed in and looked at him and said without preamble, "You fixed it." "Yeah," he said. "Was it hard? Wasn't easy. Did they—" She paused, choosing carefully. "Were they bad to you?" He thought about Vanessa on the dock with the microphone and the laugh and the crowd. He thought about the cameras and the stairs in the parking lot and the woman in the headset saying mechanic like it tasted like something she needed to get off her tongue. "Some of them," he said, and I fixed the engine." Aya sat with that. She pulled her backpack onto her lap the way she did when she was thinking. Outside, other kids were climbing into other cars, and the ordinary afternoon of an ordinary school day was moving around them like water around something fixed. "Dad," she said. "Yeah. Was it that feeling, the rightness one?" He looked at her. She was looking out the windshield now, the same way she'd looked out this morning, patient and sideways, and already halfway to knowing the answer. "Yeah," he said. "It was exactly that." She nodded once, satisfied. "Good," she said. "Let's go home." He started the truck, pulled into the afternoon traffic. Let the marina, the cameras, the crowd, the envelope in the glove compartment, and the morning that was already becoming a story he hadn't asked to be in, let all of it fall behind them in the rearview mirror, smaller and smaller, the way things do when you're heading toward the only place that was ever actually home. He'd hoped for one quiet evening. That was all. One evening where dinner was just dinner, where the television was background noise and not a screen showing his face, where Aya did her homework at the scratched kitchen table, and he sat nearby with his coffee and the simple accumulated piece of a day that had gone well. He wasn't asking for much. He'd never asked for much. But by the time they pulled into the driveway and he cut the engine, his phone had rung 11 times from numbers he didn't recognize, and there were 3 voicemails from his shop assistant, Joey, that started with "Boss, I don't know if you've seen," and ended with increasing urgency. And when he went to put the phone in his pocket, Aya was already looking at it, the way she looked at things she'd decided to be patient about. "How bad is it?" she asked. "I don't know yet." "Your face says you know." He got out of the truck. "Go start your homework. I'll figure out dinner." She gave him the look, the one that said she was not fooled, but was choosing to allow it, and went inside. He stood in the driveway for a moment, phone in hand. Then he called Joey back. Joey Reyes was 24, not related to Diana, and had been working the front desk at Holloway Auto and Marine for 2 years. He was capable, occasionally distracted, and had the particular gift of young people who had grown up online. He understood how things spread before they spread. The same way some people can smell rain before a cloud appears. He picked up on the first ring. "Boss." "Okay, so." "Just tell me," Marcus said. "The video from the marina, is it like it was at 400,000 views when I checked 20 minutes ago? It might be more now. There are news stories, like actual news stories. The Chronicle did something. There's a thing on one of those tech blogs about Ms. Langford, and the thing she said. About marrying you." Marcus closed his eyes for a second. "The shop's been getting calls," Joey continued. "Like a lot of calls. People asking if you're taking new clients if you do private consults. One guy who said he has a yacht in Sausalito, and he'd pay, Joey." "Yeah." "Did anything break in the shop today?" A pause. "No." "Is the Rodriguez transmission still on the lift?" "Yeah, I was waiting for." "I'll be in at 8, Marcus said. "Take a message for anyone who calls and don't book anything new until I've looked at the schedule." "Boss, some of these people are offering." 8 o'clock, Joey. He hung up. Inside, Aya was at the kitchen table with her math book open, but she was looking at her phone, and her expression was the specific controlled neutrality of a kid who has found something significant and is deciding how to present it. He went to the refrigerator, started pulling out what was there, leftover rice, the chicken he'd marinated that morning before the 5:30 call had changed his day, an onion. He turned on the burner and started cutting without looking at her. "Dad?" "Homework." "I'm doing it." "That's not what your phone's for." "I know, but..." She stopped. Then, "Your face is everywhere." He kept cutting the onion. "I know. There's a video. It's a lot of people have seen it." "I know, baby. And the woman, the CEO there, are people really mad at her? Like a lot of people." He set down the knife and turned around. Aya was looking at him now, not at the phone. She'd put the phone face down on the table, which was how she signaled that she was done using it, and was trying to be present. He'd taught her that. The fact that she did it now for him made something move in his chest. "Put it away completely," he said gently. "Backpack." She didn't argue. She slipped the phone in her backpack, re-zipped it, and straightened in her chair. "Is it going to be bad?" she asked. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe. Probably not. People find something new to look at pretty fast. But tonight it's us." "Tonight it's us," he agreed. "Is that scary?" He thought about it. The onion was making his eyes water, which was convenient. "A little," he said. "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment, and he turned back to the stove. The chicken went in. The oil popped and settled. "Dad," she said, "does it change anything? Like for real? Does it change anything about who we are?" He looked back at her. 11 years old, with her homework open and her backpack zipped and that question sitting in the air between them, like something she'd been carrying since the truck. "No," he said. "It doesn't change anything about who we are. Just what people think we are." "People have always thought things," he said. "That's not new." She chewed on that. "Okay," she said, and opened her math book. He cooked dinner. She did her homework. The kitchen was warm, and the food smelled right, and outside, somewhere in the world, a video kept moving through the internet with a momentum that neither of them had asked for and couldn't stop. But for 45 minutes, the kitchen was just the kitchen, and dinner was just dinner, and Marcus Holloway stood at the stove and felt the particular peace of a man who knows exactly where he is and exactly why it matters. The call started in earnest the next morning. He'd slept 6 hours, which was normal. He'd woken at 4:47, which was also normal. He'd made coffee and sat with his 30 seconds of silence and thought about the day ahead, the Rodriguez transmission, a brake job on a 17 Civic, a marine consultation he'd booked 2 weeks ago for a guy named Teller who had a vintage Chris Craft with fuel delivery issues. Normal work. Good work. Then he'd looked at his phone. 47 missed calls. 62 text messages. 4 voicemails from numbers with area codes he didn't recognize. His email, which he checked approximately once a week and mostly contained invoices and the occasional newsletter from a marine mechanics trade publication, had 91 new messages. He put the phone face down on the counter and drank his coffee. Then he turned it back over and started reading. Most of it was what he expected: requests for interviews, requests for consultations, the occasional person who had his number somehow and just wanted to say something supportive in the particular effusive way that strangers on the internet expressed support, which was to say, overwhelmingly and with exclamation points. There was an offer from a marine services company in San Diego asking if he'd be interested in a consulting contract. There was a message from someone identifying themselves as a producer for a morning talk show. There was a message from Kevin Park. "Mr. Holloway, the piece ran this morning. I tried to write it the way I said. I hope it landed right. If it didn't, I'm sorry. If you ever want to talk no recorder, no story, just talk the offers open. Take care of your daughter." He read the message twice. Then he opened the Chronicle's website and found the story. Kevin Park had written something different from what Marcus had expected. It wasn't about the yacht or the CEO or the public humiliation made good, though all those elements were in it. It was about something else, about what it meant to be the kind of person who walked into a room where everyone had already decided what you were and just got to work. It was about Raymond's garage in Fresno. Marcus wasn't sure how Kevin had found out about Raymond. Maybe public records, maybe someone in the industry who knew Marcus, but it was there, accurate and carefully handled, without sentiment and without exploitation. At the end of the piece, there was a quote from Marcus that he hadn't given in an interview, because he hadn't given an interview. Kevin had taken it from something Marcus had apparently said loud enough in the engine room for someone to have recorded it, 3 words addressed to no one in the quiet just before he'd climbed the ladder to tell Diana to bring the engines up. "Yeah," he'd said. "I know." Kevin had put it at the end of the piece after describing the engines coming to life and written, he didn't say it to the cameras, which weren't there yet. He didn't say it to anyone. He just said it to the machine and to himself and to whatever it is that lives in a man who has been doing this long enough to have earned that quiet certainty. Then he went upstairs and he did what he'd come to do. Marcus sat with the piece for a long time. Then he set his phone down and went to get Aya up for school. Joey was waiting at the shop when Marcus arrived at 8, wearing the expression of someone who had been there since 7:30 and had been managing things. 17 new booking requests, he said before Marcus had his jacket off. 3 of them are for Marine consults. One guy flew in from Seattle last night. He's been calling since 6 a.m. Tell him I'll get to him when I get to him, Marcus said. He said he'd double your rate. Rodriguez transmission first, Marcus said. Then the Civic brake job. Then I'll look at the schedule. Boss? Joey. People are really trying to... I know what people are trying to do, Marcus said. He hung his jacket on the hook by the door, the same hook it had hung on for 11 years in the same shop, with the same smell of oil and metal, and the particular institutional cold of a garage in the morning. This shop runs the same way it ran on Monday. Triage by urgency, not by rate. We take care of the people who were already in line. Joey looked at him for a moment. Then he nodded, and something settled in his expression, not quite understanding, but the approximation of it that comes from watching someone you respect operate on principles that are different from the ones the world is currently offering them. Okay, Joey said. I'll hold the Seattle guy. Tell him Thursday if his schedule allows, Marcus said. And make sure he knows the rate doesn't change because of... He gestured vaguely at the air at the invisible weight of the past 24 hours. Any of this. He went to the lift. He went to work. The Rodriguez transmission was a complex job, a 14 Silverado that had developed a shudder at highway speed that 3 other shops had misdiagnosed as a torque converter issue. Marcus had identified it 2 days ago as a worn third-gear clutch pack, which was a more labor-intensive fix, but the correct one. He'd ordered the parts. They'd arrived. He got under the truck and started where he'd left off, and within 20 minutes, he was somewhere else entirely. That door his ex-wife had described, the one he stepped through when the work became the world. The morning passed. At 11:30, Diana Reyes walked into his shop. He heard Joey greet her, heard the slight surprise in Joey's voice, and came out from under the Silverado to find her standing near the front desk in the same black blazer she'd worn at the marina. She looked slightly less exhausted than she had at 7 the previous morning, which still meant she looked like someone running on insufficient sleep and significant professional pressure. Ms. Reyes, he said. I would have called, she said, but I assumed you weren't answering unknown numbers. Correct. He wiped his hands on a shop rag. What can I do for you? She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card, which she set on the counter. She wants to meet with you, formally, at her offices. Marcus looked at the card. Langford Systems logo, clean and corporate. About, she'd rather explain in person. Is this about the press? No. Diana paused. She's been in a conference room since 7 this morning with her board. There's a proposal she wants to present to you before she announces it publicly. She was specific about this. She wanted you to hear it from her directly, not from a press release. Marcus studied her. Diana Reyes had the face of someone who carefully did not express opinions about her employer's decisions, but who had opinions fully formed and well considered nonetheless. What do you think I should do? He asked. She blinked, clearly not expecting to be asked. I think, she said slowly, that she is trying to do something real. Whether it lands as real depends partly on you. That's careful, he said. I'm a careful person. Is it worth my time? She met his eyes. Yes, she said, and the carefulness dropped for just a second, just enough for the direct answer to come through clean. Yes, I think it is. He looked at the card again. Looked back at the Silverado on the lift. Tell her Friday morning, he said. I'll be done with what's on the lift by then, 9 o'clock. She has a board call at 9. Then 10. I'll tell her 10. She picked up the business card, put it back in her bag. He already had the address, and turned to go. Then she stopped. The Chronicle piece, she said without turning around. Did you read it? Yes. It was good. It was, he said. Kevin Park is one of the good ones, she said. In case you were wondering. Then she walked out of the shop, and Joey appeared from somewhere in the back with the expression of someone who has been listening and is trying to look like he wasn't. "Who was that?" he asked. "A careful person," Marcus said, and went back under the Silverado. Friday arrived the way weeks do, when something significant is sitting at the end of them. Both quickly and slowly, the days both ordinary and faintly charged with the awareness of what was coming. Marcus finished the Rodriguez transmission on Wednesday. The Civic's brakes on Thursday. He called the Seattle guy a man named Gareth, who owned a 70-foot sport fisher and had been dealing with an intermittent hydraulic issue for 6 months, and spent 45 minutes on the phone with him, asking questions, listening. By the end of the call, he had a strong theory about where the fault was, and Gareth had a Thursday appointment booked at standard rate. No special pricing, no acknowledgement of anything that had happened at the marina. Gareth had seemed slightly confused by this, and then, when it became clear Marcus wasn't going to change his mind, quietly grateful. The Langford Systems offices were in a high-rise downtown, the kind of building that announced itself with glass and angles, and the particular brand of architectural confidence that says, "We have arrived, and we would like you to know it." Marcus parked the truck in the building's garage, rode the elevator to the 22nd floor, and was met by a receptionist who clearly knew who he was and was professionally committed to not showing it. Vanessa's assistant walked him down a long hallway and into a conference room with a view of the bay that probably cost more per square foot than his shop's entire monthly rent. Vanessa was already there, standing at the head of the table, rather than sitting the posture of someone who had prepared for this and wanted to control its energy from the start. She was in a gray suit today, slightly less formal than the marina blazer, slightly more than what she'd have worn to a working meeting. She'd picked it deliberately, he guessed. Everything about Vanessa Langford was deliberate. "Thank you for coming," she said. "You said it was worth my time," he said. "Not you," Diana did. High praise from Diana. She gestured to a chair. "Please." He sat. She sat across from him, and there was a folder on the table between them, closed. She didn't open it immediately. "How's the shop?" she asked. "Good, busy." Because it was already busy," he said. "The noise from the marina helped some, but I was booked 3 weeks out before any of this." She nodded. "I've been watching the coverage," she said. "The way the story moved, the things people attached to it." "It moved because of what you said on the dock," he said directly but without heat. "Not because of anything I did." "I know," she said. She placed both hands flat on the table, a gesture he was starting to recognize. She did it when she was about to say something she'd worked to be honest about. "That's part of what this is about." She opened the folder. "My board has approved a new initiative," she said, "a paid apprenticeship program. 12 months full salary, equivalent to entry-level technical roles, structured mentorship, and a pathway to full employment for anyone who completes it." She slid a 1-page summary across the table. He looked at it. The numbers were real. The structure was real, not a press release initiative designed to run for one news cycle and quietly disappear, but something with infrastructure behind it. HR involvement, budget line items, a partnership with 2 community colleges. "Who's it for?" he asked. "People without 4-year degrees," she said. "Skilled workers. People in trades. People who know how to do things that matter, but don't have the credential that gets them through the door of a company like mine, or any company like mine." He read the page carefully. She let him. "The tech sector," she said while he read, "has spent 20 years building walls and calling them standards. Degree requirements for roles that don't need degrees. Credential filters that screen out people who can do the job and screen in people who have the paperwork. I've done it. My company has done it. I've been sitting in a boardroom defending hiring practices that—" She stopped, started again. "That would have screened you out before you'd said a word." He looked up. "If you'd applied for a consulting role at Langford Systems," she said, "you would not have made it past the initial filter. Not because of your ability, because of a checkbox." He set the paper down. "I know," he said. That doesn't make it okay. No, he said. It doesn't. I want to name the first cohort, she said. I want to call them the Holloway Fellows. The room was quiet for a moment. Outside, 22 floors down, the city was doing its ordinary Friday morning things, traffic and coffee, and people walking to jobs they did with varying degrees of competence and passion and necessity. Why? He said. Because, not what it does for your press coverage, he said. Why to you, personally? She held his gaze. He'd noticed she'd gotten better at that over the course of the week, or maybe she'd always been capable of it, and the dock performance had been something else, something she wore and could take off. Because I stood on that dock and used you as a punchline, she said. And I did it because something in my brain had already sorted you by your boots, by your truck, by the absence of the right kind of paper with the right kind of seal on it. And I was wrong, and I could issue a statement and move on, and a lot of people in my position would do that, and nobody would say much about it. Or I could do something that was actually proportionate to the wrongness of it. Using my name, Marcus said carefully, is not the same as correcting the thing you said. I know. And it might make you look good in a way that... I know, she said again, and there was an edge in it now, not defensive but honest. I know that. I've thought about that. I've thought about it for 3 days. And I've come to the conclusion that I can't do something good without it also being good for me, because I'm not a saint, and I don't have access to purely selfless action. What I can do is make sure the thing itself is real. The program is real, the money is real, the jobs are real, the people it helps will be real. She took a breath. The name is a gesture. You can refuse it. The program runs either way. He looked at her for a long time. How many people in the first cohort? He asked. 20. We want to scale to 50 by year 3. And the trades pathway, is it just tech or? We're partnering with 3 marine service companies and 2 manufacturing firms. It doesn't have to be a Langford Systems job at the end. It just has to be a real job. He nodded slowly. I want to see the full proposal, not the summary. She reached into the folder, slid a 20-page document across the table. I assumed you'd say that. I want a week to read it. You have it. And if I find something in it that doesn't sit right, tell me, she said. I'll fix it. He picked up the document, looked at it, set it down again. One more thing. Okay. Captain Osei, he said. Has he been? He's been promoted, she said before he could finish. Fleet Operations Director, effective this week. He didn't know you were going to ask. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Good, he said. I listened, she said simply. He picked up the document again, and this time he stood tucking it under his arm. She stood too, the way you do when a meeting has reached its real conclusion, when the thing that needed to happen has happened. Mr. Holloway, she said. Marcus, he said. If the program uses my name, you can use my name. The corner of her mouth moved, not the performance smile, the real one, small and slightly wry. Marcus, she said. Thank you for coming. Thank you for doing something, he said. Instead of just saying something. He walked down the hallway past the receptionist into the elevator and stood alone for the 22-floor descent with the document under his arm and the view of the bay receding above him. The lobby was full of people in the particular uniform of a Friday morning, in a high-rise lanyards and coffees, and the controlled urgency of people who had somewhere to be. He walked through them and out to the street and stood for a moment in the October air, the document tucked under his arm. His truck in the garage 3 levels down his shop on Clement Street, 30 minutes away. His daughter in 6th grade, 4 hours from pickup. He thought about the 20 people who would be in the first Holloway cohort, whoever they were. He didn't know their names yet, didn't know their stories, but he knew the shape of their experience because he'd lived some version of it. The room that didn't see you coming. The filter you didn't get past. The expertise that existed in your hands and your memory, and your careful attention to things that most people walked past that had no box to check and no certificate to frame. He hoped the program was real. He'd read the 20 pages and find out. But standing there on the sidewalk outside a building he'd never expected to be in, he let himself believe for just a moment that something true had moved through the noise of the past week. Something that started with a joke on a dock and ended here with a document that might open a door for someone who would otherwise have been standing on the wrong side of it. He went to get his truck. He had work to do. He read the 20 pages on Sunday morning. Aya was still asleep. The coffee was made. The kitchen was quiet in the particular way it only got on Sunday mornings, when the city hadn't fully woken up yet, and the light came through the window at a low angle that made everything look slightly more serious than it was. Marcus sat at the scratched kitchen table, with the Langford Systems proposal in front of him, and a red pen he'd found in the junk drawer, and he read slowly, the way he diagnosed an engine, not looking for what he expected to find, but for what was actually there. It took him 2 hours. He made notes in the margins. Not many a question about the mentorship structure on page 7. A concern about the timeline for the manufacturing partnership. On page 14. A flag on the language around program completion requirements that seemed vague in a way that could become exclusionary if nobody watched it carefully. He circled 3 things. Underlined 2. Put a star next to the section about the Marine Services pathway, because that part was good. That part was genuinely structurally good. When he was done, he set the pen down and sat with it. The program was real. He'd been looking for the seams, the places where the intention didn't match the infrastructure, where the press release version of something had been stitched onto a hollow frame. He'd found a few rough edges, but no hollowness. Whoever had drafted this had done it with care. Not just legal care, not just liability care, but the kind of care that comes from someone who has thought about what happens to the people the program is supposed to serve after the announcement is over. He suspected that person was Diana Reyes. He'd probably never ask her. He picked up his phone and sent Vanessa a message, not a call, because calls invited the kind of extended conversation he didn't have the Sunday morning for. Short and direct. Read it. Have notes. 3 questions. Can meet Tuesday if your schedule allows. Her response came back in 4 minutes. Tuesday works. And thank you for reading it carefully. I could tell you would. He set the phone down and refilled his coffee, and thought about that, about being the kind of person someone could tell things about before those things happened. About whether that was something you built deliberately, or something you simply became through enough mornings of waking up at 4:47 and doing what the day asked of you. He didn't arrive at an answer, which was fine. Some questions were for sitting with, not solving. From down the hall, he heard Aya's alarm go off, the one she'd set herself, a Sunday alarm that she refused to explain the purpose of, but that consistently went off at 8:45. He heard her silence it. Heard the particular pattern of her Sunday morning movement: bathroom, then kitchen, then the chair across from him, then coffee for her that was mostly milk, and he never commented on it because her mother had drunk coffee the same way, and some things you just let be. She came in, poured her coffee, sat down, and looked at the proposal still open on the table. "Is that the thing from the lady?" she asked. "Ms. Langford." "Yeah." "Is it real?" "Mostly," he said. "I have some notes." She pulled the proposal toward her and looked at it, turning pages slowly. He watched her read the way he'd watched her read since she was 6, with her whole face, her expression tracking what her eyes were doing openly before she'd learned to manage how much she showed. "It has your name in it," she said. "I know. The Holloway Fellows." She said it carefully, like she was checking the weight of it. "That's us." "That's our name," he said. "Whether it should be on the program is a different question." She looked up. "You're not going to say no, are you?" "I haven't decided." "Dad?" "What?" 20 people get to do something real because someone put our name on a door." She set the proposal down and wrapped both hands around her coffee mug the way she did when she was being deliberate. "That's not about us. That's about them." He looked at his daughter. 11 years old with her Sunday morning hair and her mostly milk coffee, and that particular clarity she had, the kind that came from being raised on honesty instead of comfort, the kind that cut through the noise of a thing and found the true center of it without making a production of it. "When did you get so sure about things?" he said. "I learned it somewhere," she said, and looked at him steadily, and he felt the full weight of that, the responsibility of it, the privilege of it, settle across his shoulders, the way it sometimes did on quiet Sunday mornings, when he remembered that everything he did was being watched and absorbed and carried forward by someone who would outlast him. "I'm going to say yes," he said, "with the notes." She nodded satisfied and went back to her coffee. "Good," she said. "Now can we have pancakes?" He met with Vanessa on Tuesday. He brought his 3 questions. She answered 2 of them on the spot and called someone on the third, a woman from her legal team who joined by phone and walked through the completion language with him until it was tighter and cleaner and meant what it was supposed to mean. The meeting took 90 minutes. When it was done, Marcus told her yes. She shook his hand across the conference table, and for a moment, they were just 2 people who had arrived at something together that neither of them had planned for. And the distance between a dock in Bayside and this conference room on the 22nd floor felt like something that should have taken much longer to cross. "The announcement goes out Thursday," she said. "Okay? There will be press questions about you, about whether you're involved in the program." "I'm not running it," he said. "I'm not a spokesperson. My name is on the cohort. That's the extent of it." "I'll make that clear. And tell them the rate hasn't changed at the shop," he said, in case anyone's wondering. She smiled, the real one, the small, slightly wry one he'd first seen in the conference room the week before. "I'll tell them." He stood to leave. She stayed seated, which was unusual for her. She'd stood for every goodbye he'd witnessed. He turned back. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You're going to anyway," he said, and she blinked, recognizing her own words from the dock coming back to her, and something moved across her face that was almost amusement, and almost something more complicated than that. "Fair," she said. "The morning at the marina, when I said what I said, you didn't react. Not at all. And I've been thinking about that since. Most people need the reaction to be worth something," he said. "I didn't need anything from that moment, so there was nothing to react to." She was quiet. "You were performing," he said without hardness. "I could see it, and I've never been interested in being part of someone else's performance." "That's simple," she said, "not a question." "That's simple," he said. "It's not a special skill, it's just knowing what the moment is actually about." She looked at him for a long time. "I'm going to be thinking about that for a while," she said. "I know," he said. "You're that kind of person." And then he left because the Rodriguez transmission had an owner coming to pick it up at 2, and the shop didn't run itself. The announcement went out Thursday morning. By noon, it had been picked up by 17 outlets. By evening, the phrases Holloway Fellows and Langford Initiative were sitting next to each other in tech and business coverage in a way that was substantive enough that Marcus allowed himself to read 2 articles before putting his phone away. Both articles mentioned him. Neither of them got him quite right. One made him sound more saintly than he was, the other more accidental, but the program itself was described accurately and the numbers were real, and that was what mattered. Joey called him from the front desk while he was under a truck. "Boss, there are 2 people outside. They say they're here about the Fellows thing." Marcus rolled out from under the truck. "What do you mean here?" "Like physically here, outside the shop." He wiped his hands and walked to the front. 2 young people, a man, maybe 22, and a woman who looked a couple years older, were standing outside the glass door with the particular posture of people who have rehearsed being somewhere and are trying not to show it. The man had paint on his jacket. The woman had a portfolio under her arm. Marcus opened the door. "Mr. Holloway," the man said. "Yeah." "My name's Darius. This is Keeley. We saw the—" He stopped, recalibrated. We're not here about the program exactly. I mean, we're going to apply. But we wanted to, I don't know. We just wanted to say thank you. In person. Before it got all official. Marcus looked at them. Darius had the kind of face that was holding a lot of things carefully hope, specifically that particular brand of held carefully hope that belongs to people who have wanted something for a long time and have learned to protect the wanting of it. What do you do? Marcus asked Darius. Automotive restoration. I restore vintage cars. I've been doing it out of my uncle's garage for 4 years. I applied to 3 companies last year. All 3 said they required a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. For vintage restoration, Marcus said. Yeah. Marcus looked at Keely. Boat systems, she said. Marine electrical. I grew up doing it with my dad. I know this work. I can't get anyone to look at my resume because I don't have the credential. Marcus stood in the doorway of his shop on Clement Street and looked at these 2 young people who had driven to find him because something had shifted in a way they needed to stand close to, and he felt the full, quiet weight of what the week had actually been about. Not the marina, not the cameras, not Vanessa Langford's joke or his answer to it, or the video that had shown 400,000 people a mechanic walking onto a yacht in grease-stained boots. The weight of what it had been about was standing right in front of him, 22 years old, with paint on his jacket, wanting something real, not knowing yet whether the door would open. Get the application from the Langford Systems website, Marcus said. Fill it out exactly as instructed. Don't undersell the garage work. Darius' 4 years of hands-on restoration is more than most people bring. And Keely, the marine electrical pathway, is specifically designed for people with your background. Read the requirements carefully. Then submit. That's it, Darius said. That's it, Marcus said. The program does the rest. That's what it's for. But I'm not on the selection committee, Marcus said. My name's on the door, that's all. The program will look at what you can do, which is all it should ever look at. Darius looked at him for a moment, and then he nodded a deep, serious nod, the kind that means more than agreement. Yes, sir, he said. They left. Marcus stood in the doorway and watched them walk to their car, and Joey appeared at his shoulder. There were 2 more before those 2, Joey said quietly. I told them the same thing. The website. Good, Marcus said. Boss, Joey said. I think this is going to keep happening. I know, Marcus said. It's all right. Send them to the website. That's what the program is for. He went back under the truck. The work was what it had always been: specific, physical, demanding of attention and patience, and the willingness to listen to what a machine was telling you before you decided you already knew. Nothing about it had changed. Everything around it had shifted slightly, the way the gravity of a room shifts when something significant has passed through it, but the work itself was unchanged, and he was grateful for that. Grateful for the constancy of something that asked the same of him every morning, regardless of what the internet was doing. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday morning in November, Marcus Holloway stood in front of 42 sixth graders at Roosevelt Middle School for Career Day. He'd agreed to it because Aya had asked him. Not pressured him, asked once directly with the patient straightforwardness she used for things that mattered to her. I want them to hear it from you. The real version. He hadn't been able to say no to that. He didn't try. The classroom smelled like dry erase markers and the particular low-grade industrial cleaning product that all school buildings seem to share across every generation. He was standing at the front of the room with his green canvas tool bag at his feet and 42 12-year-olds looking at him with varying degrees of attention. Aya was in the 3rd row. She was looking at her desk very deliberately, the way you do when you're trying not to look like you're trying not to look. The teacher, a young woman named Ms. Carver, introduced him briefly and stepped to the side. Marcus looked at the room. How many of you know exactly what you're going to do when you grow up? He asked. About 12 hands went up confidently, the way kids' hands go up when they haven't yet learned to be embarrassed by certainty. Keep your hands up if you're still going to be doing that same thing in 20 years, he said. A pause. 3 hands stayed up. The others came down slowly, with the slightly sheepish energy of kids who have just grasped something they hadn't considered. Good, he said. That's honest. Here's the thing about honesty. It's the most useful tool you're ever going to own. More useful than anything in this bag. He set his foot lightly on the tool bag. And it's free. You don't need to go to any school to get it. He told them about Raymond's garage in Fresno. He told it simply without sentiment, the way Raymond would have wanted a man who fixed things, who taught a 14-year-old to listen before he touched, who ran the same shop for 38 years and never once needed anyone to validate what he knew. He told them about waking up at 4:47, about the 30 seconds of silence, about Aya's question over scrambled eggs. But when you do, can you fix it? He told them about the marina. Not as a victory story, he was careful about that. Not as the mechanic who showed them all. He told it as a story about what happened when you knew something true and someone didn't believe you, and the question was what you did with the gap between those two things. The gap, he said, is where you find out who you are. When someone tells you you can't, or you're not enough, or you're in the wrong place, what you do in that gap, in that space between what they think and what you know, that's the whole thing. That's the whole story. Everything else is just details. A hand went up in the back. A boy, compact and serious, with the expression of someone who had been waiting for the right moment. What if you don't know? The boy said. What if you're in the gap and you're not sure if you're right? Then you find out, Marcus said. You do the work and you find out. Certainty isn't something you walk in with. It's something the work gives you if you're honest about it. What if the work says you were wrong? Then you were wrong, Marcus said. And you say so. And you figure out why. And the next time you're closer to right. That's the whole process. That's all any of this is. The boy nodded slowly. Marcus had the sense he'd been chewing on something for a long time and had just been handed a useful way to hold it. Aya was looking at him now. She'd given up on the desk. She was watching him the way she'd watched him that morning over scrambled eggs, patient and sideways, and already halfway somewhere he hadn't gotten yet. He talked for another 20 minutes. He answered questions about the yacht, about the misalignment, about what it felt like when the engines came to life with the same directness he'd given the adults at the marina, adjusted only for the fact that these were people who still had the whole distance ahead of them and deserved to see it clearly. He did not oversell it. He did not make it mythic. He told them what it actually was, a man who knew one thing very well, who had learned it slowly, who had been dismissed for it, and had not let the dismissal become a verdict. When it was over, Ms. Carver thanked him. Kids shuffled past, some of them stopping to say something, a few of them touching the green canvas bag with a curiosity they clearly couldn't fully articulate. The serious boy from the back walked past without stopping, but he met Marcus's eyes as he went. And the look was enough. The look of someone who has taken something and doesn't need to say so. Aya waited until the room had mostly cleared. Then she walked up to him, and she didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there with her hands in her sweatshirt pocket, and that patient look. How was that? She said finally. Harder than fixing the engine, he said. Good hard or bad hard? He thought about it. Good hard, he said. The kind that means it mattered. She nodded. Some of them are going to remember that forever. She said simply and factually, the way she said things she was certain of. You know that, right? I hope so, he said. Not hope, she said. No. He looked at his daughter, 11 years old, her mother's eyes, the same quiet certainty that had been making him reach for something better since the day she was born. Yeah, he said. Okay, I know. She reached down and picked up his tool bag by the strap. It was almost as big as her torso, and held it out to him. He took it. Let's go, she said. I have practice at 4. They walked out of the classroom down the hallway, through the double doors that opened onto the November afternoon. The sky was that particular California November blue that exists nowhere else in the world, wide and clean and slightly cool, the kind of sky that doesn't make promises, just offers what it is. He put the tool bag in the back of the truck. Scratched rear panel, sun-faded hood, the side mirror at a slightly different trim level from the rest. He got in. She got in. He started the engine, and it turned over clean and steady and without complaint, the way a well-maintained thing does, the way anything does when someone has been paying attention to it. "Dad," Aya said as he pulled into traffic. "Yeah. I'm proud of you." She said it looking out the windshield, not at him. Direct and sideways at the same time, the way she always did the things that cost her something. "I know you didn't ask for any of this week, but I'm proud of how you did it." He drove. The city moved around them. Ordinary November Thursday afternoon life, traffic and crosswalks, and people going to the places they needed to be. He let the words settle the way good things settle, not rushing them, not making them smaller by responding too quickly. "Thank you, baby," he said. She nodded once. Pulled her feet up onto the seat, tucked her knees against her chest, and looked out the window at the city going by. They drove home. The engine ran clean all the way. Later that evening, after dinner and after homework, and after Aya was in bed and the house had settled into its nighttime quiet, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, with his coffee going cold, and the horse drawing, still taped to the refrigerator, and the ordinary accumulated weight of a life that had not changed in the ways that mattered, and had changed quietly and permanently in the ways that would. He thought about Raymond, about a garage in Fresno, and a 14-year-old boy learning to listen before he touched. About the 38 years of work that had never asked for an audience and had never needed one. About the particular inheritance you receive from a man like that. Not money, not property, not anything you can put in a folder or frame on a wall, but something that lives in the hands and the patience and the willingness to stay with a problem until the problem tells you what it needs. He thought about Darius with the paint on his jacket, and Keeley with the portfolio, and the serious boy in the back row with the question about the gap and all the people behind them. The ones who knew things that no credential had certified, who had been standing at doors that didn't open, who were going to get a shot now because something true had moved through the noise of 1 week and landed somewhere real. He thought about the 30 seconds of silence he gave himself every morning, about how small that was and how necessary, about all the things that were small and necessary, all the habits and rituals and quiet choices that added up to a life, not a famous life, not a wealthy life, but a right one, a life that clicked into the place it was supposed to be. He got up, washed his coffee cup, turned off the kitchen light, walked down the hall, stopped at Aya's door, listened to the steady quiet of his daughter sleeping. Then he went to bed. At 4:47 the next morning, the alarm went off. He silenced it before the second buzz, sat on the edge of the bed for exactly 30 seconds, and then stood up. A man who knew exactly what he was, exactly what he had, and exactly what the morning was about to ask of him. He was ready. He had always been ready. That was the whole story, and it was enough, and it was true, and it was his.